Welcome to New Garden Friends Meeting Digital Worship. Happy Easter. Here at New Garden Friends Meeting, welcome is essential to our lives together, and how we welcome one another is part of our faithful practice together on first days. This Sunday, I want to do welcome a little bit differently. Some Sundays at New Garden Friends Meeting, we take a few minutes and everyone stands up and we walk around the room and we say good morning and we exchange handshakes or hugs or elbow touches. And this morning, I want to capture that sense of greeting one another joyfully. And I want to invite you to take a few minutes now, a few moments, to send a text message or a Facebook message or an email to another person at New Garden Friends Meeting and greet them this morning. Say hello to them, send well wishes, send love to them this morning. So take a few moments and send a text or a Facebook message or an email or whatever way works best to you. Send a message to someone else at New Garden Friends Meeting and greet them warmly this morning. And for those of you who are joining us here live and maybe are not regular attenders at New Garden Friends Meeting, or who are joining us for the first time, who are new to our community or new to this live worship, I want to extend a special welcome to all of you. You are welcome in this space among these friends. The love of New Garden Friends Meeting surrounds and uplifts you. I am so glad that you have joined us here this morning for our digital Easter worship. Welcome. Friends, I have just one announcement to make. I know you're all probably still busy texting and messaging each other and greeting one another, but I'm going to go ahead and make my announcement. If you feel so led to give financially to New Garden Friends Meeting, you can still give through the mail. You can mail a check here to the New Garden Friends Meeting office, and we would joyfully receive your financial gift. So it's still possible to give to New Garden Friends Meeting if you would like to do so. This morning for Easter morning, I have selected a reading from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28, verses 1 through 10. I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version, although you will hear that I have altered the language just slightly to ungender God. After the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of God descending from heaven came and rolled back the stone and sat upon it. The angel's appearance was like lightning, and its clothing white as snow. For fear of the angels, the guard shook and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus who is crucified. But he is not here, for he has been raised, as he said. Come and see the place where he lay, and then go quickly and tell the disciples, he has been raised from the dead. And indeed, he is going ahead of you to Galilee, and there you will see them. And this is my message for you." And so they left the tomb quickly with fear and with great joy and ran to tell the disciples. And then suddenly Jesus met them on the road and said, "Greetings." And they came to him and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. And then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my siblings to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." Mark Alley, our music director here at New Garden Friends Meeting, is going to be leading us in song this morning.
Good morning. Our song today, this glorious Easter morning, is Morning Has Broken. I'm going to do all three verses. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning. Praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where God's feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
Friends, I am mindful this morning that many of us carry prayer concerns this morning, that our hearts are heavy when we think of our country and our world, that many of us are struggling with fears and worries or grief at this time, and I want to invite you to join me for a few moments of silent prayer. During this time, let us lift up together not only our friends and our families, our neighbors, but also those who are working so hard to keep our country running, those who are taking care of those who are sick and ill. Let us lift up our whole country in the light, and indeed our whole world, and especially those who are sick and suffering in this moment. Let's take a few moments for silent prayer. Amen. Easter Sunday, with its celebration and flowers, with its packed churches and fancy Easter outfits, choirs and Easter egg hunts, is a very familiar part of American culture, even for those who are not practicing Christians. Certainly, Easter Day is a time when we remember the victory of life as we celebrate the coming of spring and the lighter and longer days. But for many, the Easter story is also associated with personal sin and with salvation. I am a faithful Christian, but I have to tell you all that I do not read the Easter story as a story about sin and sacrifice, or at least not in a traditional way. The story of Easter, as I suggested last Sunday on Palm Sunday, is a story about evil and the ways that evil so often functions in our world. When Jesus rode on a donkey into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, he did so to defy the Roman Empire that was brutally occupying his land. He did it even though he knew, or he must have known, that in doing so, he risked his own personal safety. And this is another reason that the Easter story is so familiar to all of us. Because the story of Palm Sunday through Good Friday, the story of resistance and courage being met with violence and tragedy, is one that is familiar to all of humanity. The greedy, the powerful, the rich, the privileged, they control the majority through fear and the suggestion of violence. And this is an old story, one that we're all familiar with. You will do what we say, evil tells us, or you will lose your job. You will do as we say, or we will gun you down in the street. You will do as we say, or we will bomb your hospitals, your schools, and your cultural sites. You will do what we say, or you will rot in prison, awaiting for your court date with your bail set impossibly high. You will do as we say, or we will lynch you. You will do what we say, or we will crucify you with the other criminals. The threat of violence and ultimately death is the way that evil keeps and maintains its power in big and small ways. And we know in our gut that this is true, that these patterns are real in our world today, just as they were real for Jesus in his time. I can only imagine that the disciples must have been afraid as they celebrated Passover. They must have felt the looming threat that was before them. Jesus had for all of his ministry preached in defiance of evil, preaching a new way, a better way, a way of mercy and love and justice. And the disciples must have felt the pressing threat of empire upon them, and they must have been afraid as they shared that final meal together. And then, of course, the worst does happen. Jesus is taken and killed as an example to keep everyone else in line, killed to shore up the established power. And then those who loved him mourn, and those who followed him felt helpless. And there was silence, and there was suffering, and there was grief, and there was anguish. And the moment where they buried Jesus is one that is incredibly painfully human. A predictable ending to a story that happens again and again and again among us humans. A story of a violent death, and with that violent death, the end of hope. But then the sun rises on Easter morning. And the Marys, who are so faithful to Jesus, they go once again to visit his grave. And this is the moment where that old, predictable story of death and violence changes. The angels said to the women, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus who is crucified. He is not here. He has been raised. And Christ is risen." And in that moment, the story is rewritten. And the Marys run, filled with the impossible, filled with the joy of the moment, filled with the knowledge that a story that was supposed to end in despair and death instead ends with life having the victory. is filled with a new possibility that the story is ending in a new way, that love is winning. And these Marys, they are the first preachers of that good news, the first to say that day that we are changing, that a better world is quietly building around us, that a new thing is happening, that a new story is being told, a story where peace overcomes violence, a story where meekness wins over coercion, a story where love overcomes hate. Because the grave is empty and Jesus is risen. I read the Easter story as a deeply political, as deeply controversial in this moment in human history as it has been always. Because evil continues to be part of our existence. Because the threat of violence is still part of human life. Because oppression is still part of what we experience in our country and throughout this world. But this year, as I sit with the Easter story, I think of that moment when the Marys turn away from the grave and run into the morning, filled with wild and impossible hope, toward their encounter with life, when they had only expected death. I think of that moment when their grief turns to joy. I think of the ways that on Easter morning, as the day breaks, as the sun shines, as the clouds part, something new grows in the place where it was only barren. Love has the victory on Easter morning. And I think today of the incredible acts of love that are taking place around us every moment in this moment of crisis. I think of those buying groceries for others, and those who are calling all the time to check in on elderly neighbors. I think of the cards being written, the letters being composed. I think of the Facebook messages being sent, the FaceTiming that's happening, the moments of connection on Zoom. I think of all of the ways that people are reaching out to one another with love and with compassion. I think of the people who are sewing masks for others, or who are making face shields for medical personnel. I think of those who are giving away their stimulus money to others who have lost their jobs. I think of all of the people who are working so hard to protect and to heal. And I think of all of the people who day after day are faithfully staying home, staying away from others, who are carefully practicing that social distancing. And they're doing it, yes, for the people that they love, but so many people are staying home to protect strangers in a way that is selfless and so loving. This Easter, I am filled with the affirmation of the good news of the Easter story. That love is constantly, persistently, irresistibly winning in our world. The good news that the sun will rise again, The good news that spring will come again and hope is not an illusion. May this Easter you also be filled again with hope and with the promise of tomorrow. May you be filled again with the knowledge of the power of love. May you be filled with the wonder that even when everything else in our lives is strange and frightening, spring is still coming alive all around us. Flowers are blooming and the grass is green, and the sun is still rising day after day. This year, as we retell again the story of resurrection, may it fill you with the courage to do impossible, beautiful, holy, and loving things. And as you go forward into this Easter morning, to your celebrations with friends and with family, whether they are with you or whether you are connecting with them through Zoom or through Skype or through FaceTime, may you go into this morning knowing that love will win. Love won on the first Easter morning, and love is winning again today and tomorrow and for every day to come. Easter blessings on all of you. Friends, I'm going to end our time of live streaming, and I would invite you to settle into a few moments of silence, whether that's 3 minutes with your little kids, or whether that's a full 20 or 30 minutes in the quiet of your home. Thank you for worshiping with me this Easter morning.